Hello. We have reached the end of week 6 with writing our purpose statements and our research questions. I have really tried to spend a good deal of time in the forum talking about the particular postings that you all have with regard to your purpose statements and your research questions. And I really hope that it's been instructive, that it makes sense to you, the suggestions that I'm making. We are moving to the entire introduction now. We have a frame, we have the problem, purpose, research questions, which is our PPQ frame, and on the framework of our study we can put the various components that create the introduction. And let's talk about what those are. Okay. The introduction, first of all, should begin with a narrative hook. For a qualitative study, that might actually be a story. For a quantitative study, oftentimes what we're talking about is a statistic that's of interest, or something that would pique the reader's interest in order to capture attention and get that individual interested in our study. So we begin with the introduction. Notice that when and this is the way that we want it to begin, either chapter, or if we're talking about a thesis, or section. Most of us, by the way, are not doing a thesis. Most of us are doing a field research project, an applied project that is specific to our organizations, which is why we have this particular course that is designed for research and organizations. So, as we are doing field research projects, then we're going to use the nomenclature. Rather than chapter 1, we're going to use section 1. Section 2 will be the literature review, and section 3 will be our methods or procedures if we're doing qualitative. And that, by the way, gets us all the way to our proposal. Section 1, 2, and 3 actually constitute the proposal. So we today are going to be, and this week are going to be talking about section 1, introduction. So we've got 3 concepts, which are our streams of literature, our topics. And we're going to talk about them with the highlights with our introduction. We're not going to go into detail because we're going to spend time in the literature review going into detail. But for just an introduction, to give background of our topic, and to introduce the problem or the gap in the literature, we're going to have a discussion of the highlights, those particular pieces of the literature that are important. So I hope you've been working on your literature at the same time that we have been working on our problem, purpose, and research questions, because now is the time when we're going to bring those back into play. Okay, so we've got the early discussion that introduces the problem, the gap, and we've already got a problem statement. So then we will begin, we'll use that problem statement here, introducing it with the problem to be addressed by this study is, and name our problem, our gap, our need, our situation. We can, by the way, introduce that. We can go from our introduction of the entire study to introducing the problem and have a little bit more than just the statement of the problem. That's up to you, whatever makes sense for you. Then we move to the purpose statement. And the purpose is kind of the therefore. Once we've identified the problem, the purpose statement is our approach. So we've identified the problem and therefore the purpose of the study. So that leads us right into our purpose statement. The purpose of this We name the method or tradition study is, and then there are many ways that we can frame up that approach to the problem. Here you describe that approach, and we've talked about that in our purpose statement last week. So, and that's what you're handing in this week. And by the way, if you think about, as we're talking about this, as I'm going through this, and because I'm not going to begin actually grading the problems, or excuse me, the purpose statements until, oh gosh, probably Tuesday. So please feel free to make a change to that if you wish. And you can add in a second, just say that it's the second one, and I'll only review that one for grading purposes. So we've got a purpose statement. So note that so far, the only differences between qual and quant introduction is how we framed up the purpose statement. And we're going to look at Creswell for the two templates, qualitative and quantitative, for the purpose statement. Okay, now we move to a little more divergence for qual and quant, because theoretical perspective is different depending on which paradigm you're in. And remember that paradigm, when we say qualitative, we're talking about a way that we think about research. We think about, if we're qualitative researchers, we're thinking about research as exploratory. We're thinking about research in terms of words and descriptions and interviewing people. It's not going to be generalizable because it's going to be the perspectives of a specific set of individuals who we believe can answer specific questions about a specific phenomenon under study. On the other hand, quantitative, we're going to be looking at discussing. We want to take an objective view. Qualitative is subjective, quantitative is objective. And we believe as quantitative researchers that we can, all of us, come to the same conclusion, not just close or a little bit different and have it be okay. We want the same conclusion, and we want the quantitative conclusion to be generalizable, such that if we had different people that were researchers looking at the same set of data, that through inter-rater reliability we would have a high statistic probability that we would come to the same conclusion. It would be an objective conclusion. We're going to be talking about our results, our findings, in statistical ways, in numbers and percentages, unlike the qualitative folks who are going to be talking about their research in terms of themes. Specifically when we're talking about case study, we're going to, that's also descriptive, both are descriptive if we're talking about the descriptive survey. We're going to frame that up. Our description is going to be in numbers, percentages. We're going to talk about X percentage. 35% of our responders said this, while 75% said that. Now we're going to have in a qualitative, we're not even going to talk in terms of how many said what. We're going to talk about the themes that they came to in what they said. And that's far more important. We're just not going to be interested in the numbers at all in qualitative. It's all about the words. The themes, the description is going to be narrative. It's going to tell a story. So numbers, quantitative, words, qualitative. So when we're talking about theoretical perspective, we're talking about what theory provides us with a lens as the researcher. For example, we might be talking about transformational theory. We're looking at our study through a transformational theory, and or maybe through Kolb's experiential theory. So it's a springboard, it's a lens. On the other hand, when we're talking about the theory in quantitative work, we're building on the theory, we're adding to it. We're talking about how the data might confirm, disconfirm, or extend theory in extant literature. It's a very different way that we bring theory into the research we're doing. Now we come to our research questions, and we frame those up very differently. If we're talking about a qualitative study, we have a grand tour question, a single overarching question that's referred to, the nomenclature in qualitative research, as the grand tour question. From the grand tour question, then sub-questions are derived. Those sub-questions are stated in formal academic ways in our section 1. Later, when we write our interview protocol, we'll return to those academic questions, sub-questions, and we'll convert them into very conversational language with jargon, and those will become the interview protocol, the questions that we actually ask our participants. If we're talking about quantitative, however, the research questions to be addressed are, and we list those questions. We're generally here going to have, say 3 questions, 3 or 4 questions that we're going to address. They can be yes/no questions that we're going to address. If we are talking about questions, sub-questions here in qualitative research, we will not use yes/no questions. We're going to say what or how or in what way. We might even make them as statements instead of questions. Here in quantitative, we might have yes/no questions, and they would be very specific to our purpose statement, so that all aspects of the purpose statement are addressed in these questions. We might have hypotheses that we're going to test, and the hypotheses can be directional or they can be null. If they're null, then we're going to state them as there is no relationship exists between time spent in training and training-related performance. A non-directional might be time spent in training and training-related performance will be related. Or directional, more time spent in training will positively correlate to training-related performance. So, depending on how we want to set up our hypotheses, we can use these 3 forms. And it isn't necessary to have hypotheses. We can if we wish. It's entirely up to the researcher. Then all of us, quant and qual, are going to have our terms that are of any importance to the study defined here. So list them all, particularly if you use jargon, or if there are terms that are used in different ways in the literature. We're going to then select how we're going to understand that definition for that term in this study. Limitations and delimitations. For qualitative, the limitations, at ISU there's a preference for beginning with limitations first as a subsection, and then going to delimitations. Notice that in our information that is provided for reference for this week, I have provided you with definitions and citations for limitations and delimitations, and those are from Cresswell. Okay, so begin the subsection by defining what the term limitation is, and you get that Cresswell definition. Limitations are the weaknesses, they're the shortcomings for your study. some limitations are inherent in the study method, and I would suggest that anytime you're using a qualitative study, there is going to be a limitation in that it is a self-report. There is just no way that any human individual can be quote-unquote honest entirely, because we censor what we say, whether we're doing that intentionally or whether we're doing it unconsciously. We just do choose what we're going to tell another person, even if we're filling out a survey. So that's going to be a limitation. That self-report is a limitation for survey, as it is for case study. Another limitation for case study is going to be the time that you spend. And for survey, a limitation is that we don't know when a group of individuals responds to the survey. Say even we had a really high return of 52%. We still have 48% who didn't respond, and we don't know what they would have responded had they chosen to return their survey questionnaires. And so that's a limitation. We don't know what the survey responders might, the ones who chose not to respond, might have said. If they all had responded in a group, it could have entirely changed the outcome, the findings of our study. So that is a limitation. So look at, and actually in the literature, look for the limitations, the shortcomings of your particular methodology. Delimitations, then, are the fence around the study. Your delimitations are your criteria. For example, if you choose to have adult trainers and you want 6 to 8 trainers who are going to, and this is a qual study, who are going to be interviewed, then you need to say, okay, does gender matter? Do I need to have some women and some men, or is that not important to the who might respond to a training in a training study? If it's important, or if it's important that what their ethnicity is, then you're going to want to say that. So does that trainer need to have worked for the company for over a year, and in the training organization for over a year? Do they need to be full-time? Maybe it's 5 years. So those are all delimitations. You're going to say what time frame you're going to have your study in. Is it 1 year? Is it 6 months? Now, if you're talking about the delimitation for your survey, then you're going to say that your survey will actually be available for response for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And you may even give a specific timetable when you will stop the survey and no longer accept responses. And so that would be something that you would have as a delimitation. You might have as a delimitation for your survey that you would have, that you would be sending X number of maybe 200 survey questionnaires, and it would be delimited to 3 different organizations, what those organizations were, and that if people did not respond fully to the questionnaire, you were going to not use it, or maybe you are going to use it, or if they didn't respond to one section, you're not going to use the data. And so you would delimit in those ways. Okay, so notice that there are resources for those things again in your in your resources for week 7. Then we move on to significance of the study. For some of you, and you will see this in the forum, some of you included the significance in the study, which is really the so what of the study. Why are we doing this? What will it get us? What's the benefit? And you included the significance in your purpose statement. That's actually separate as a subsection. So we want to include that so what as setting it apart. But we want to include it in conditional terms. By conducting this study, we might gain, or the organization might be advanced in this way, or it could be advanced, or we can't say by conducting this study X will happen. Our organization will make more money. Our organization will reach more students with this program. We don't know that. We don't know what the data might show us. So we have to be conditional in our language. Even at the end of our study, when we talk about implications, we may, and of course we're not going to get to the end of the study for this course. We only get as far as methods. Remember, we're doing sections 1, 2, and 3, and we're talking about section 1 now with the introduction. So we just can't make a conclusion about something we don't know, and we want to be very careful about our claims. We don't want to claim absolutes. We don't want to claim something that we can't support. So we want to use that kind of conditional language. Okay, that brings us to our summary. So then we're going to write, and the summary shouldn't be a couple of sentences, 3 sentences maybe. So very brief, very high level, 20,000 foot level. And then we're going to tell the reader what we told them. We're going to add a transition sentence to state what we'll find in section 2, the literature review, and basically say that we will, section 2, we'll discuss the review of the related literature. That's it. That's all we need. All right, that is our introduction. What we're going to discuss in our forum this week is your thoughts and questions about the components of the introduction and what others have done. You will probably learn from what some do, so you'll post maybe not your entire introduction, although we can if you wish. What I can do is open up what I'm going to do is open up another forum where you can simply submit your introduction, and then we won't really discuss it. We'll have the discussion in the committee forum where you can just have conversation about various components. And that, ladies and gentlemen, gets us through our introduction, and my goodness, we're making a lot of progress. This is just great. I'm very excited about your studies and look forward to looking at your purpose statements this week and the introductions at the end of the week. See you in the forum.